Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Zach Hval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, and today I have the privilege of laying down for you count them, five, not six, five essential things that every lead guitar player needs to know. These concepts kind of build off of each other, and once upon a time when I was teaching in person one-on-one with students, these were kind of things that I would lay down lesson by lesson, but today I'm going to go through them somewhat quickly, so it is going to assume that you've been playing guitar for a little bit, and maybe you just want to check off a few things, make sure that you're on the right track to develop. That's great. Maybe you're starting to take your first steps into lead guitar, whether that's in a rock context or a blues context like I just did. I feel like these things are good to have in the background. If nothing else, they serve as a good foundation for you. So what we will do is we will zoom in to a close-up and we'll kind of unpack each and every single one of these five things one at a time for your listening and dining pleasure. Here we go. Alrighty, let's jump into it. Number one, the first building block into lead guitar players lead guitar is to having a good foundation of rhythm and time. You've heard it said many times, no doubt, if not from me, from other players on the internet, other teachers, that the best lead guitar players in the world are also the best rhythm guitar players in the world. Okay, take a look at Jimi Hendrix, any live performance or recording of him. Eric Johnson, another good example, especially live when he's kind of comping. So what do I mean by that? I mean, can you play in time? Whether you're in like a pop music format and you just are counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, things like that. Can you keep in time? Can you play along to a metronome? If you go the studio musician route, which I did for a little bit there, you'll be playing to click tracks. So that's why practicing with a metronome, well, not the only reason, but one of the many benefits of practicing with a metronome is helpful. Also, just finding backing tracks or listening to your favorite blues artists or rock artists or whatever and seeing if you can kind of count along as you play. So if I can just demonstrate that really quickly here with this backing track that I have, which is a blues shuffle in the key of E, I'll just count it up for you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, and what have you. It's a little fast, but having a good rhythmic foundation is absolutely essential, because if you can't play in time, then you can't really play at all. You can't really contribute to a band or a recording or anything like that. So having a good foundation in rhythm or timing, okay? And this is going to come back a little later on, so kind of this is why I started with that. The second thing, numero 2, is understanding chords or chord shapes. So what I kind of mean by that is not necessarily the cage stuff. While that is helpful to know where all of your chords are, I kind of mean more so what makes up a chord. Like if I take this A chord here, right up here on the 7th fret of the D string, that's the root of the chord. Then below it is your major 3rd, 5th, and then the root doubles. The reason why you should know chords and what make up chords is because you're going to, when you're soloing, you're going to want to highlight those notes, ideally. Either you're going to start a phrase on that, or you're going to end on one of those tones. So a good example, actually, and I very intentionally did this at the beginning of that intro, was I did this little arpeggio sort of a thing that outlined this E9 chord. So you can think of it as basically it's the exact same thing as E7 here. So right, this is E7, this is E9. So a different note, and then what I did was I started on the 5th of the chord, so in E, that's going to be this B note here up at the 9th fret, and I made sure to emphasize some blues changes there, and so yeah, just knowing these chords can help you kind of pick apart and find cool little licks to play. That's kind of sort of a very much a Robin Ford kind of a lick. I mean, I added that little nudge there, which we'll come around to later in this little lesson here. So, right, we've got eurythmic, playing in time. We've got chords, right? So knowing where to find them in that cage system is really good, right? Because everything breaks down into those 5 shapes. I'm not going to go in depth in that now. If you're curious about that, there are tons of resources online. Specifically, you're going to want to look into a jazz guitar player named Joe Pass. I believe he invented that. But for our purposes here, we're just going to focus more on the big concepts for you to kind of explore and unpack on your own. But yeah, so knowing a few arpeggios. Later on, when we switched to the 4 chord, that A in the shuffle, I tried to outline a nice A13 track, or maybe A7. But knowing these, having those in the background, so you know how to break them apart, not only just play them, but break them apart into their essentials will help you. Number 3 is gonna be, now you might be thinking, Zach, why didn't you start with this? Because those other things, in my opinion, are more important. But the next thing that you would want to know as a budding lead guitar player is the pentatonic scale. Because basically everything you will learn, whether it's in jazz, blues, well maybe not so much jazz, but blues, rock, pop, country music, everything is going to be based off that pentatonic scale. We find the blues scale from that pentatonic scale. So knowing that up and down the neck, I just played it for ease of teaching and ease of understanding here in that classic home row that we all know and love so much, hopefully. So if you've got a good grasp on pentatonics, not just in the one position, but maybe all 5 of them, it kind of just depends. If you don't think you're going to use a particular pattern of the scale, I guess you don't have to learn it. That has bitten students of mine in the keister later on when they go to do more advanced things, because they just don't have that muscle memory. So maybe, be familiar, be friendly with them, but we definitely have this. Well, I added the blues note in there. Sorry, car alarm was going off there. Definitely having that understanding of the pentatonic scale will help you. So those 3. So just to recap, if you're lost here, I know I'm going kind of fast, but rhythmic ideas, timing, can you play in time, chord shapes, or chord voicings, understanding of chords, and then the pentatonic scale. Because wouldn't you know it, all of those notes that make up those chords are in that scale. So you can kind of mess around with that. Number 4, I would say, is how to bend. There are all sorts of videos on that. The basic gestalt, if you will, is that you want to, say this G string here. I want to do a bend on that. There's a couple ways I can approach that. I can do the whole tone bend. See, I'm bending from this D note up to that E. And that's how you can kind of train your ear on that is, whoops, let's try that again. You can kind of hear it as you do it. There's also, in blues specifically, something that we like to call the blues curl. It's really kind of just a micro bend, because I'm kind of just curling. You can maybe a quarter note bend, so it's not quite half that. It's definitely not whole, but just a little nudge. That's what I've taught it as in the past, is a nudge. You hear that all over Jimi Hendrix's playing, is these, because it's not quite in tune, but it's not so out of tune that you're like, well, what the heck's happening there? It just grabs their ear. So, the whole tone bend, you can do the really big I almost broke a string there. Jimmy Page bends, tone and a third. Those take, practice as well, and hand strength and all sorts of things. But knowing how to bend in tune. So or you can kind of, there's all sorts of, you'll know. It'll sound awful if you're not into it, but just knowing how to bend. I see a lot of people like choke up on the neck when they're trying to bend. It's not what you want to do. So there is like a mechanic thing as well as a pitch thing. Generally, you just want to with your wrist. Almost like you're opening a doorknob. Just kind of push up on the string, because that'll keep you from tiring out. And you can do lots of cool things like that. Which is really where that will excite an audience, when they can kind of, when you lock into, again, circling back to a timing thing, if you lock into like a drummer or something like that, while they're like pounding on something, it can really help the audience emotionally connect with what you're trying to convey musically. So that's cool. Bending is cool. I don't care, people comment about boomer bends and things like that. I'm here for it. I love the boomer bends. I don't care. There's another one. Kind of a Chuck Berry kind of an idea there. So you can play around with these things. And then the last thing we want to talk about, once you've kind of got all of those things in your pagan rock gumbo, if you will, stirring it around and serving it up piping hot, much to the food poisoning of others, you want to think about phrasing. Now, phrasing isn't so much what you're playing, which the previous four things kind of talk about. It's sort of how you play it. So the attitude, even the rhythmic ideas, So going back to that opening lick, people, I think, who are used to pop music and things like that, or playing pop music, will comment on my own stuff, as well as other guitar players saying, oh, your timing is bad. It's like, no, what they're doing is very intentional. You don't have to, guitar players, we often think of bars of two. You don't necessarily have to, do that with everything beginning on beat 1 and ending on beat 4. You can craft some really awesome lines, especially in blues, arguably more so in jazz, if you kind of wait. So I tried to, at the beginning, time that so it wasn't quite on the 1, sort of on the 2. And you can create these lines that float over bar lines. And as long as you're sticking, again, to those chord tones, you can have a lot of fun. So that's one part of phrasing is kind of just, waiting. You can start on a 1, you can start on a 2, you can even start at the end of the bar. If you want to have like a long phrase where you're just letting the bass player, drums, keys, whatever, do their thing, and then you just jump in with something like, it's very cool. And then again, there's that nudge. Scoo-dabby-dee-dooley-dabby. Things like that. You hear, I'll never forget it. And when I was in college, I saw a guy called Mark Elf. He was a jazz guitar player. And as he was playing these insane licks and arpeggios and things like that, he was like, sort of, I don't want to say scatting because it wasn't vocal what he was doing. It was because he was a guitar player. But he was kind of sounding out the rhythmic ideas and the melodic ideas as he was playing them. So he was improvising too. So finding, if you're working on phrasing and things like that, finding things that you can like sing, like things like that are going to be things that stick with the audience as well as other guitar players. So that's a huge part of phrasing. So it's kind of, see how these things are all kind of bending together? The phrasing, the rhythmic ideas, the how to bend, the knowing your pentatonic scale. There is a thing that was kind of straight Dorian, sort of a Dorian idea, just because I like to bring in that darker flavor from time to time. But thinking pentatonically, you could do things in the E pentatonic or in that that shape there of the A shape of that E pentatonic scale. So it's phrasing, finding things. There's another guitar player or guitar teacher I look up to. He has like the coconut shrimp thing where you coconut shrimp. Just like finding little sentences and playing them is kind of how I started practicing my phrasing. There's a whole video I did on my blues guitar series that deals with this more in depth. But to review, 5 essential things that every guitar player needs. Number 1, rhythmic / timing. You need to be able to play in time. You need to be able with rhythm. Numero 2, chords, shapes. Knowing what makes up a chord, knowing where to play them, physically on the neck. And then the pentatonic scale, that's number 3-0. Number 4-0, how to bend, bending in tune using that blues curl. And number 5 is phrasing, so not so much what you're playing, that's the other parts. It's number 5 is how you play it. You learn all 5 of these things, get them under your hands, and voila! You're an excellent lead guitar player. And that is 5 essential things that every lead guitar player needs to know. Thank you so much for watching this video. It really does mean the most. If you enjoyed it or got something out of this, I would appreciate it if you'd hit that like button down below. And also, while you're down there, why don't you go ahead and hit the subscribe button, since it's in the same vicinity as that like button. That would mean the most to me as well, because when you do subscribe, you get access to more guitar lessons like this, as well as historical deep dives, and you get to see me practice what I preach. That's right, I do these things live every week, Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. That's Musical Hangout, the only live music experience that people are talking about in 2025. I know it, I see it, I'm out there, I'm reading them on comments all the time. So stick around for that. I would also appreciate it if you click any of the links down in that description box to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, things like that. You can keep up to date with all of my activities. You can also find links to my original music on Spotify, iTunes, and things like that, so you can actually hear me do these things as well. See, I'm a man. I'm out there doing these things live for the people. You can also hear recordings. Your choice. That would really mean the most. That's all I have for you this time. I'm Zach Hval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, signing off, reminding you that if something goes without saying, let it. Bread is bread, cheese is cheese, praise God.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.